Okay, thank you for taking the time to talk to us in our audience today. We really appreciate someone with your expertise being able to share some things with us. Just for anyone that's watching that isn't familiar with you already, can you give a brief introduction and tell us what you've been doing and what you specialize in?
Yeah, sure. My name's Simon Reynolds, and that's two Y's in Simon, which is pretty unusual. I guess I'm a marketing and business growth expert, and I guess I differ from most out there in that I've owned my own businesses since I was 23, and I built 4 different multi-million-dollar businesses, including the 15th largest marketing services company in the world.
That is pretty impressive. Well, we're happy to have your expertise with us and the information you can share.
Yeah, my absolute pleasure.
Thank you. So I have gone through some of the things you've written recently on your website and your books, and one thing I noticed was you just did a write-up with Jeff Bezos, the second wealthiest man in the world, talking about his principles. And one thing I thought was interesting, I recently saw one of the co-founders of Netflix speak, and he talked about the importance of focusing on solving the problem and not focusing on proving that your solution or your first product is right, so not being married to that. A lot of business owners, that happens. They come up with a product or an idea and they get stuck on that product or that idea rather than solving the problem they initially set out to solve. So as a business owner, how do we keep our eye on solving that problem so we can accelerate and get wealthy rather than kind of getting married to our initial idea and trying to prove we were right?
Yeah, great question. And look, I think there's several answers to that. First of all, we have to allocate a set periods of time each week to addressing the problem. So what happens is when we own a business is we start getting traction, we start getting clients, and we start serving clients and putting clients first. And all of a sudden, what happens is the analyzation of solving the bigger problems of our business is left for when we have some spare time. And I think that's a huge problem because suddenly it's a year later and we still haven't improved the structure of our business or improved our solving ability. So number one, I advocate that we set times in our calendar each week to work on this issue of how we best solve the problem for our clients, or how we best position our business, or how we do our marketing. Then, second of all, what we should do is look at people who have solved it before us. So in almost every sector, someone has solved this problem before in your industry, whether it's in your local area, whether it's in your country, or whether it's in the UK or Australia or South Africa or any of these other English-speaking countries that we so rarely look at. So number one, allocate time. Number two, model people who've done it before, adapt their best systems and apply it into your business. You do those two things and your rate of progress is going to be really fast.
Perfect. So are you allocating a systems and product model over a service model then? Because you mentioned how we get caught up servicing our clients. And I know like the book Built to Sell, I forget the author, but that was one of his main premises is if you're always trying to serve people, you're always catering to them, you're always changing your business to them. But if you come up with a product model and you concentrate on processes that are repeatable and buildable, your business grows more efficiently and easier. It's easier to sell it. It's easier to expand it. Are you on board with that basically?
Yeah, absolutely. John Warrilow wrote that book, and I think it makes a lot of sense. What happens typically is, and I coach business owners all over the world, and what I see is that their own talent is what stops them from building a big business. They're talented. They're very good at what they do. They can persuade clients. They can do almost everything in the business and do it better than almost everybody else. And that very fact stops them from being able to grow a very big business because they become a talent-based business, not a systems-based business. And the talent-based business starts off with them doing everything. And then they start looking for other rare gems like themselves who they could hire to build the business to the next level. Now, the problem with that is people who are highly talented are hard to find, number one. Number two, they're expensive. Number three, all the other companies want to get them as well, so they're being poached all the time. A talent-based business at first looks wonderful. Oh, we're going to have all these star players, but it's not very practical for most business owners. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't try and hire the best people. Of course we should, but with the assumption we're going to try and hire the best people. What we need to do is we need to shift from a personality-based business, from an individual-based business, to a business that is following simple systems on how to do this well. And the best way of doing that is to create a checklist culture so that everything that we do often is written down on a checklist, and our staff are held accountable for running that checklist. So right down from the receptionist who picks up the phone, she follows a series of procedures, to a new business presentation, we follow a series of procedures. Those procedures, once written down, are much more likely to be followed, number one. And once written down, we can refine them over time in a systematic way, so that if that star person leaves, it doesn't matter, that somebody else can come in and follow the system. Now, I don't know if it's true, but I heard that McDonald's lose a third of their staff every year. But of course, it doesn't affect them in any way, because everybody's just following a systems-based business.
That brings an interesting question. So if I'm a superstar and I start off and my business is talent-based, but I also want to put those systems in place, where do I draw the line between building that personal brand and having that systematic company? Or do I? Can those systems become the Sean brand that's out there? Is that the way I do that, or do I need to differentiate those at some point?
Yeah, I mean, that's an excellent distinction. I absolutely feel you can have dominant individual brands. You can have a huge personal brand and still have a systemized business. In fact, I think it's imperative, because if you have established a major personal brand, then you've got a million people coming in wanting to ask you about potentially working with you. So unless you have the systems behind it, then the chances of being able to convert a lot of them and keep a lot of them are really small. Now, who is the biggest example of a personal brand? Well, it was probably Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs, when he was alive, was literally the symbol of Apple. And yet it became the biggest company in history with a personal brand at the front of it. Now, that wasn't all it was about, but because it obviously had an incredible suite of products. But if he can create it largely when he was alive around the power of a person, then we can too.
Perfect. So you did mention that you've worked with people all over the world, and one thing I thought interesting in one of your writings was you recommend, when researching other companies to see how you could grow your business fastest, you recommend researching companies in other countries. And I was just wondering why that was a recommendation of yours as opposed to researching the company in the next city.
Yeah. Interesting. Look, what I find is that there's obviously many advantages, examples of good companies close to us. But what I found in my field, which is marketing, is I would often find that there were people doing stuff brilliantly in Britain, or in Brazil, or in Japan, in Singapore. In my business, there's people doing stuff brilliantly. In South Africa, there are some of the world's best marketing companies. So, yes, we will get better if we emulate those people who are who are at the top, in the near vicinity around us. But let's have a look at who's best in the world, because you can often grab techniques, strategies, positioning ideas, marketing angles that no one in America has ever seen or even thought of, but are being utilized by leading companies elsewhere. So once you institute these procedures into your business, then no one can compete in your country, because they don't even know these systems or methodologies exist.
That makes a lot of sense. When I actually lived in Brazil for a while, and I traveled a bit. And I remember when I first moved there, everyone makes you think they're behind. You know, if you're an American, you're supposed to think that America's the top of everything. Obviously, it's not accurate. And I got there and I saw their public transit system, and I saw that every gas station had 4 types of fuel and we don't. And I saw how they were efficient with energy in ways that we weren't. And I'm like, well, wait a second. You know, there are people out there in other places that are way ahead of us in certain areas. And to your point, you know, I think that's great. And I think that's absolutely correct. There are other countries that are doing things we're not doing that we could emulate and accelerate here. So that's a great strategy. Thank you.
Well, very impressed that you lived in Brazil. Did you ever dance in the Mardi Gras in a G-string?
I did not wear a G-string, but I was at Carnival, absolutely. I was actually in Salvador, Brazil, which most people don't realize is actually the largest one. They estimate between 1 and 2 million people a night in the streets there, and it literally... The bands come down the street on these giant trucks and they just play free concerts all day. And it gets to the point when the band comes near, you have to smush back into the crowd because there's no room in the streets left. By the time the musicians come through the crowd, it's literally everyone's there for 6 days. People don't work. Most people don't sleep. Nothing's open. So it's either you Carnival or you do nothing. So again, like coming back here and even relating that to people, I was like, it's like if you were in Manhattan and like Billy Joel, Bruce Springsteen, and Madonna just played free concerts all day and there were dollar beers in the streets. Imagine what it would look like. Like, so I'm like, they got us beat on partying down there too, you know? So it was a pretty fun experience.
Brilliant.
So I signed up for your 9 ways to increase profits in the next 24 hours worksheet, which I thought was really interesting. And I'm thinking we'll probably give people a way to sign up for that as well when we're done here. Pick one of those. What do you think the number one thing is right now? If I'm a slightly overwhelmed business owner, what's the one thing I can focus on right now to start seeing some immediate improvement in my business?
Yeah, great question. I would say the fastest and very rarely utilized is just ring every previous lead that you've ever had or email them and say, hey, you're still looking to do something in this area. So, you can send a 2-line email to every single person in the last 5 years that you've got an email to that ever inquired about your business. And it just says, hey, John, let's say you sell turnips. Are you still looking to get some awesome turnips? That's it. And if you do that, with almost 100% certainty, a percentage of them will come back and say, as a matter of fact, I am. Why don't we have a talk? Or at the very least, they will now be refreshed that you're someone that they should speak to. So people are always looking for new clients. But new clients are hard to get, they're expensive to get, and they're time-consuming to get, right? Whereas people who have already either dealt with you or at least know about you are vastly easier to get to write a check. And we need to spend much more time concentrating on our previous clients, our current clients, and our earlier leads as a way of generating revenue, not just looking for the holy grail of the new client.
Yeah, I think a lot of the marketing, the Frank Kerns and the digital marketing company there, they talk about recency and frequency being the best indicator of a good customer. But you're one of the first people I've heard this talk about going back to your leads list and even the cold leads. Although it's now that you say that, I did see someone post about that in a marketing group a couple of weeks ago and how effective it was for them. They talked about that. That's literally what they did, was pull out their cold lead list, send out a 2-line sentence. They probably got it from you, actually. In retrospect, and that's exactly what they sent was, hey, are you still looking to do a website? And they're like, I got 20 new clients out of my 150-person lead list. Because 20 people wrote back and were like, oh, yeah, we forgot. Oh, yeah, we need to do it. Or, oh, can we talk about the budget? But he's like, that's all it took was a 2-sentence email, to a small lead list that I had, and I got a whole bunch of customers out of it. So
yeah. Well, a lot of people think that the reason someone didn't go with them is because they didn't like them or that the price was, we were much more expensive. Sometimes it's something like they just forgot about it, or they got busy with something else, or they had other agendas, or at that moment they couldn't afford it, but now they can, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And there's so many reasons that someone may not have gone with us other than the fact that we're not good. And a lot of us, we don't have the confidence, so we think, oh, they never rang us back. Maybe there's something wrong with us, And these people are genuine buyers if we just stay in touch with them.
Well, a lot of times they're just the typical overwhelmed business owner like us, where they're at a point where they're focused on something else too. So I mean,
yes,
just like we're looking
right.
for sales, that's what they're focused on. So it's a really great point.
Yeah, totally.
So one thing I thought was interesting, you did a piece on suppliers and how to deal with suppliers, and you recommend improving your personal relationships with them, or at least having a lunch once a year and getting to know them a little bit better to keep up with them. Do you recommend that kind of a strategy with customers or clients as well? And do you differentiate between like your best clients, take them to lunch once a quarter, or no clients? Or do you have a strategy for that as well? Or do you stick to that pretty much with suppliers and keep customers on a business only?
Yeah. I definitely think it applies for customers as well. Obviously, it depends on your total value of customer. So if your customer's worth $100 to you, it's probably not good use of time to take them to lunch. But here's what I find interesting. Let's assume the customer's worth thousands of dollars to you over time. I am stunned at how even when I've known a client for a year and I've been working with them for a year, if I have a lunch with them, I'm stunned at how often the relationship goes deeper and deeper in the course of an hour and a half. You're asking about their family. They kind of seeing you a bit more as a friend. They see the human side, and the bonds really get strong when you get out of their office or your office and end up just kind of having a lunch. And it's really interesting. You know, people want to work with friends, all things being equal. They want to work with people they like. And a lot of us, and I've certainly been guilty of this, we can get so efficiency oriented. We go, I don't have time to do this. The relationship's okay as it is. And yet when you do, you can potentially lock that client in for years longer because they have a bit of a personal connection to you, not just a business one.
Makes a lot of sense. That's really smart. So here's a question actually that's interesting to me. I see that you grew a lot of your business using email. You still recommend email as a strong tool. We're starting to see messenger bots and texting. And do you think that email is going to stay relevant for a while? And if you don't, what do you think we should be focusing on?
I think it's going to be relevant for a very long time. It somewhat depends on the age. So if you want to reach a 17-year-old, you may not be, email may not be your optimum. But if you want to reach someone who is themselves in an enterprise, then it's a fantastic way. Yes, they're getting a million emails, but there's also a million ways of writing an email so that they stand out, so that you make an impact. And let's not forget, just because someone gets a lot of emails doesn't mean that they're not also looking for things that are of value. I would argue that they're all looking. Every morning when we're deleting 80% of the emails that come through, what are we doing? We're looking for things that might help us. And so people, even though, yes, it's competitive, people will, for a long time ahead, I think, be very open to the right approaches on email. And may I say that most small to medium enterprises do not email nearly enough. And the biggest issue is they say, well, I'll be bothering them if I email them. Now, I have two things to say about that. First of all, the average open rate is 14%, according to Infusion Rate. So most of them aren't opening your email anyway. So don't worry about sending too many because they're not even opening them, or most of them. And then the second thing is, if you feel that you're bothering them, then change the nature of your emails and start trying to help them. Give them tips, give them strategies, give them reports, give them cheat sheets, give them ways of saving time, give them things that they'll value, and then they'll respect you more as a provider and as an expert and thought leader in your field. What I see is that we're always asking for money when we send emails, or we're not you guys, because you know what you're doing, but so many small to medium enterprises are just trying to get money out of people. But email should be about establishing your reputation and staying top of mind. You talked about recency and frequency. Basically, as long as you are the supplier that they respect and that is top of mind, even if they don't want to hire someone in this field for 2 years, in 2 years' time, if you stay in touch with them with email and in a respectful way that establishes your authority, they will call you when they're ready for a supplier in your area. And most people don't do that. They don't stay in touch enough to create that bond.
Well, I know that's happened to me, actually. I've gotten to a point where I needed something, remembered something I saw years ago and can't find it anymore, and they haven't stayed in touch. And I can't find them on Google because maybe they changed their website or their brand or they let it go. So I think you're absolutely correct. I mean, I've actually looked for people in situations like that before, and because they didn't take those steps, they lost business and I couldn't get the solution I needed. So you go a different direction. So I think email brings us into a good next topic that you address, administrative help. You talk about how a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners wait too long to hire administrative help. They spend too much time on mundane tasks like deleting emails maybe, or organizing or going through them. If I'm a business owner, and again, we know a lot of them face overwhelm and they face decisions on money, how do I know when that time is to say, hey, I need to bring somebody in to take some of this off my plate and it's worth my while at this point?
Yeah, very interesting. Well, as a foundation to my answer, let me first say that in the top two things that an entrepreneur should be thinking about all day long is time management. So they should be analyzing their use of time. They should be planning their time all the time. And once you get into that way of thinking where you're obsessively looking at, let's say I'm going to work 9 hours today, what precisely should I do? And then analyzing the previous day and say, how did I use my time? Once you start putting time management at the forefront of how you operate, what happens is you will be able to identify the amount of time that you're spending on things that actually bring in income. So if once you can do an analysis going forward or retro analysis of your last couple of weeks and look at each day and say, okay, out of the stuff I did, what tasks led or could lead to an increase in income versus just tasks that are handling the business or handling the administration or handling the staff. And let us say that when you do an analysis like that, you conclude that 4 hours a week you're doing stuff that could bring in new income into the business, let's say. Then what you do is you say, okay, if I got a new staff member in to take over some of these other things, and I use the time that I saved to increase the amount of time I could spend increasing income, would that pay for the new person? So in most cases, you'll go, you know what, I could give that away, and that away, and the 4 hours I spent growing my business, I could move up to 12 hours, let's say, growing my business. Therefore, I should be able to grow my business 3 times faster. It becomes very clear that the best use of your money is to get that other person. But correspondingly, if you go, you know what, if I employ this person, I still don't think I'd be able to spend much, it wouldn't save me that much time, and I wouldn't be able to spend more time increasing income, then don't hire them. So it's really about this. Can they increase how much time you spend bringing in business? If they can't, don't hire them. If they can, hire them. Now, there's a cash flow issue with small to medium businesses because there's a lag period between when I try and get business in and when I get business in. So you do have to account somewhat for cash flow. But I would say this. Don't ask yourself, can I afford them for the next year? Ask yourself, can I afford them for the next 3 months? And if you can afford them for the next 3 months and you can see clearly that if you had them, you could spend more time on getting new business, then you should do it.
I think that one follow-up question. If I'm that owner and I'm saying bringing on help, I still can't grow my business, that sounds like kind of an issue too. How do I address that? Like if I'm freeing up time and I still don't see a way that my time would grow my business, do I go back to one of the steps we talked about before, or is there another assessment I do that says, hey, yeah, you can grow your business and here's how to figure out where to spend that time?
Yeah, look, I think that the way to grow our business is simplistically, and I know you guys know this very well, is to spend more time on sales and marketing. So it's not hard to identify different ways of doing marketing, different advertising mediums, different sales techniques, different ways of connecting with our clients, right? First, we need to identify them. Then we need to devote time each week to working on them. And over and above this is a philosophy. And the philosophy that must exist to be a high growth business, but doesn't exist in most businesses, is that the time spent on marketing and growing the business is more important than the clients. See, what happens is, and with the best intentions, they put the clients first. They put the clients in front of themselves. They put the clients and their staff, by the way, often in front of their own needs to grow the business. And what happens is this. 5 years later, all those clients have left, or almost all of them have left. 5 years later, almost all the staff have left. And you're stuck in a business that's the same size because you put their needs first most days of the week. You've got to change that. You got to. The number one most important person in your business is you. The number one most important activity is growing your business. All of the rest of those people aren't even going to be there in the long term. You got to put yourself first, and you got to make sure it's locked in your calendar, building the business before any of that stuff. And then you got a good chance of making it happen.
That makes perfect sense, and you kind of do have to put yourself in the business first, or they won't have jobs, and you won't be able to serve clients anyway. So that
true.
Is a very logical pattern there. Okay, so I think we have time for one last question. And one thing I thought was interesting, you wrote your Power Ranger theory article on the person that invented the Power Rangers, and that struck something with me. I actually went to a seminar a while back, and a guy gave a talk about how he hired his friend's daughter to read 100 success books. And he's like, you're going to read these 100 success books and give me a synopsis at the end of the summer. And he said she came back and she said that failure plus perseverance equals success. That's what every single one said, which is what your story shows. It's similar to the Sylvester Stallone story of how he kept reading the script and was like, put me in this movie, I'm not doing it. Put me in this movie, I'm not doing it. He wouldn't be anything today. So we see a lot of those kind of stories. If I'm a business owner, if I'm an entrepreneur, how do I develop those skills? How do I develop that perseverance in the face of rejection and failure so I don't give up the first or the second or the third time I'm going to that studio with this idea or that script?
Yeah, right. It's a fascinating question. And I think that there are two ways of thinking that create that result. And the first is, we need to always be working on our self-identity, because there are people who persist and still fail in business. And a lot of the reason why is one of these two aspects. The first is their self-identity deep down isn't someone who's they don't see themselves as someone who's a successful business person. So what we need to do is we need to constantly develop a new character, a new version of ourselves. We need to see ourselves as this person. We need to act just like an actor. We need to act like this new person. We need to take the actions and have the thoughts that are like, as best we can imagine, a top business person. And if you do that, at first it looks like, you're just kind of acting, but eventually it becomes customary for you, and it becomes more the way you're doing it, the way that you actually are. And it doesn't matter, whether we're talking about Warren Buffett emulating people like Benjamin Graham when he was in his 20s, or Jeff Bezos acting like what he thought was an internet business person when there was almost no internet business. Everybody does it the same way. They create a new kind of character, and then they attempt to become that. They attempt to change their self-identity so they behave like that. So that's number one. You got to do that, and that's very important. It takes daily work. I can assure you, today, before we're talking, I have worked on my refining my identity and how I see myself. Very important. And then the second is, which is also a way of thinking, is we need to see a business as purely a testing system. It's just a testing system for methodologies, right? So and techniques. We don't get when you start seeing a business as just an efficient testing system, you go, okay, how can I be really good at testing stuff? I'm going to test this product. I'm going to test this price. I'm going to test this marketing technique. I'm going to test this way of presenting to a potential client. Just see yourself as a master tester. Just make sure that when you persist, you don't just doggedly persist doing the same thing, but you intelligently persist and refine and iterate. And a great book to get on this is The Lean Startup by Eric Ries, or at least read the wiki or a summary of the Lean Startup philosophy, which is just about being really, really good at testing. And it's such an important paradigm because, you know, once you embrace it, you no longer get sad or frustrated that things aren't going well, because it's just another test. Now I'm going to change this and test this. Now I'm going to change this and test this. And eventually, almost everybody will succeed if they just adjust their self-identity as someone, their future self, as someone who is worthy of success, because that affects your actions in all kinds of ways, and then become an efficient tester. That's pretty much the game of business summed up.
Well, that's great too, because you're talking about your personal image and your mindset. You can have the mindset of becoming a data gatherer as opposed to someone that's getting rejected. You know, and that's perfect. So then you're not facing rejection or failure. You're gathering data to get better and better every day, which I think is genius. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah, absolutely. And that completely reframes a bad result as just data gathering, as you say.
That's perfect. Well, thank you. I think we actually went a little over our time, but we came pretty close. But you had a lot of great things to share, so I really appreciate that. We touched on your cheat sheet. I'll share a link to the opt-in if you want, or if there's something different you want. For everyone else that wants to stay in touch with you and follow you and learn more from you, what's your preferred channel? Where would you like us to send everybody?
Yeah, great. Just go to SimonReynolds.com, SIMON Reynolds.com, and just sign up for my blog. And every week I talk about a different aspect of business, and it should be, if you like this, there'll be more of it on the blog.
Perfect. Well, I can't imagine anybody not liking it. You had great information. We really appreciate your time.
Oh, it's been a delight, and thanks for the quality of the questions too. They were excellent.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Have a good day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.